Welcome to The Sideshow.
Okay, welcome to another episode of The Sideshow. And today, Mike is going to be leading the charge. Mike, why don't you let the audience know what we're going to be talking about today?
All right, thanks, Mark. Today, we are going to talk about Rush 2112 Side 1. And this is a perfect example of the whole concept of the sideshow, because Side 1 of Rush 2112 has a single suite of songs that are one single composition and that tell the same story. And there are 7 different parts, 7 different songs, if you will, that are part of the overall composition. But it's a single piece of music that takes up an entire side that is intended to be listened to as a whole.
Mm-hmm.
And Rush is a band that, the Rush 2112 album is the first album that really kind of put them on the map.
Oh, yeah.
As far as being a band that people around the world were at least aware of. They got much bigger a number of years later. Albums like Permanent Waves and particularly Moving Pictures, which was a massive international hit. But this is I think the first band where Rush really kind of came into their own as a band to be reckoned with, and it was a big, back when we were in junior high school. I mean, Rush was a fairly big band.
Oh, yeah.
And then they got even bigger, around the time of Moving Pictures. It's side of an album that sort of is the quintessence of an album side, in my opinion, from the classic rock era.
Well, and it was the first time that the band really got some traction with their music. In fact, they were in a little jeopardy with their record company before they made the album. Caress of Steel was the previous album, and although they had really invested in it as we're going to make the kind of music that we want to make, this whole progressive rock, not necessarily lending itself to radio play, and this is it. We're going to really invest. We're going to give people everything that we've got, and the results were a little disappointing for Caress of Steel as far as sales and their ability to sell places out on the tour. And they were starting to get some pressure from the record company to really force them into, look, man, you got to start giving us radio hits. So they really had kind of basically one more time to kind of do their type of music, this whole notion of a progressive rock and a story like this. And, well, they named it. They nailed it, because obviously some pretty big success with 2112.
Well, and ironically, the 2112 suite, and there were portions of it that were played on the radio, or at least AOR type radio. But it kind of an irony there that the record that really kind of pushed the button was a record where the primary composition was 20 minutes and 34 seconds long.
Yeah.
Just to briefly touch upon the overall history of the band leading up to 2112. The core of the band initially got together in 1969, late 60s, very late 60s. And their first album, which was just called Rush, didn't come out until 1974. The band is from Canada, and they play just basic hard rock. Kind of Led Zeppelin inspired hard rock. And the lead guitarist was named Alex Lifeson, the bassist Geddy Lee, and their original drummer, who I regret to admit, whose name I don't have on the top of my head, was still with them when their debut album, which is just called Rush, came out, which is in 1974. And a song that stayed in their repertoire called Working Man was on that album. Just a conventional hard rock song, a very self-explanatory lyrics. It was kind of a blue-collar anthem sort of song, but it was just basic hard rock. And for a number of reasons, I believe there's some health issues involved, and the original drummer didn't necessarily care for the life of a traveling musician on the road and whatnot. And very shortly after the release of their first album, their sort of the third member of the permanent band, Neil Peart, the drummer, came on and stayed with them until he passed away. I don't recall exactly what year it was, but those three members, Alex Lifeson, Geddy Lee, and Neil Peart, they were the band thereafter. And their second album, which came out in 1975, was called Fly By Night. Kind of a striking album cover. It had a snow owl kind of swooping towards you on the cover. I can remember seeing it in record stores and thinking, wow, that looks kind of cool. And that was a little more. They started to dabble in things that were a little more expansive than just the kind of straight hard rock of their first album. And as you've indicated, they sort of wanted to get into more progressive rock type material. And the Caress of Steel was their third album, came out also in 1975. You made some reference to that. That didn't do as well, or it wasn't as well received as their second album, which led to the sort of Donnybrook with their record company. And I read somewhere on the internet that their manager at the time kind of had to kind of go to the record company, and I wouldn't say beg, but kind of plead with them to give us one more album here, which as you said, the record company gave them, and that was 2112. And Led Zeppelin was the kind of the early inspiration, I think, for the original incarnation of the band, and I think they were looking now more towards Yes.
Yeah.
Was sort of more like what they wanted to be like, and more progressive rock bands from that era, and King Crimson type stuff. Although I think Yes is a better comparison. And there, back when I first heard of Rush was in junior high. I mean, 2112 came out in 1976. We were going to junior high school at the time. And there was a guy that we went to school with. You'll remember him. I don't like to use names of people that I haven't. But he played guitar in a band when we were in school, and I can still remember him talking about when we were talking about albums, and he talked about Rush and Yes were bands that he liked.
Yeah.
And so and I think it's an apt comparison. Yes, I think Yes is a more pure progressive rock band. Rush is a hard rock band that plays progressive music.
Yeah,
is maybe a way to try to articulate it. I mean, just the three members, and I think their music is more straightforward than either Yes music or a lot of progressive rock. But that's where they were, and I think that 2112 was the culmination of this desire to transition from conventional hard rock to a more progressive rock type of music. And the lyrical subject matter is fairly specific, and the lyrics were written by the drummer, Neil Peart, and his focus kind of evolved over time, and kind of like the different music that the band collected, because the band's styles of music, they changed. They morphed into different things over time, over the course of their career. But he was interested in a variety of different things. And around the time that 2112 was being composed, he was apparently into Ayn Rand, the author.
Yeah.
The word on the street is that this story is heavily based on the novel Anthem by Ayn Rand. Which I read a long time ago. It's shorter and I think more accessible than some of her other books, like The Fountainhead or Atlas Shrugged. But it's individualism. She was from Russia, and the manner in which the the Soviet Union operated, she didn't like it, and so she focused on individualism and more of a kind of a self motivated rather than collectively motivated way of thinking about the world, and freedom versus conformity, blah blah blah. And so the story here was patterned after that, an individual living in a society where conformity was sort of forced upon you. Is kind of what the subject matter was. And I mean, take a look at the album cover. It's just Rush 2112 and then a red star. So I mean, the Soviet Union, a pretty, not particularly subtle. Here's the three members of the band on the back cover, very, just a picture of the band.
Very 70s looking.
Very, and kind of reminds you of the back cover of some albums by another band that we've talked about in terms of the undergarments worn by the musician. And in the gatefold, there's the lyrics, and there's an image that it's important that you see.
Yeah.
The man and the star, because that is the protagonist, the anonymous singer, or not the singer, but the character in the story. I mean, and whether you want to refer to 2112 as a kind of like a rock opera or whatever, I don't know what the proper label is, but it's a story about a person living in a kind of a dystopian place and what happens to him. And there are other songs that Rush did that are kind of touch on the same sort of things, like Red Barchetta, for example. That the Barchetta is a car, and the singer yearns to go out beyond the walls, away from the motor law, and ride with his uncle in the wilderness in this red Barchetta, yearning to be free.
Well, and it's also a good, I think both of these songs, yes, it kind of talks about this future state where there's much more control and things that you can't do or that don't exist anymore, right? That used to exist in the past. They're told in Neil Peart had a way of some pretty complex storytelling, right? I mean, there's a lot of people that don't even know that a Barchetta is a car, right? In that, because it this type of old-fashioned Italian sports car or whatever. And the way that the story is told, it's some very visual images and that type of thing. I'd agree that they're very much the same. But all in all, it still though is a pretty interesting story from start to finish. And it just, one side note, you showed the album, and there was a lot of liner notes inside the album that gave the first time listener some help in understanding what it was they were listening to and what was going on. One of the great things about albums that you could have a lot of information packed in that you'd read the first time you put an album on. It's one of the fun parts about it, and it came in handy because this was a fairly interesting story that takes us for the first 20 minutes when we're listening to this album.
Well, and taking the parameters of a book and then converting them to a set of song lyrics with music, isn't necessarily, I mean, some people have different opinions about that kind of thing, but there's no question that the band, and certainly Neil Peart in writing these lyrics, was striving for something literary, and that the combination of the lyrics with the music was going to tell a story in a literary way. And what does a literary way mean? I guess that depends on who you ask. But I guess the sense that I intend, or what I'm trying to say, is that there's interpretation to some extent, but there is also a reality in the text, the specific words that are said that keep you between the guardrails, so to speak.
Yeah. Well, and these, we've had a lot of conversations on this show about stories or lyrics of songs that are incredibly straightforward and simple. I think that you have with a band like Rush, it's like, well, they don't have to be simple. They can be more complex. And not only the lyrics and the story more complex, but the music that backs it up and that we're listening to can be complex as well. We can use changing tempos and different arrays of instruments to help us tell that story in a more complex way than just a bass, guitar, and drums. I mean, that's what they are when they're up on stage, but they can bring a lot more into the way that the songs are written and the types of instruments that they're using. And still, if you do it right, you don't have a bunch of lost people sitting out there listening and going, what the heck is going on? You can provide this type of story. And I talk about it a lot on this show, but that challenge of having the lyrics really be appropriately layered on top of the music creates just such a nicer feeling and a more powerful experience in listening to it. And they nailed that on this particular album, and especially on this song or side that we're going to talk about.
And they continued to do more extended conceptual pieces on their records after this. I mean, on Farewell to Kings, there was the Cygnus X1. On Hemispheres.
Yeah.
And they do extended instrumental stuff like La Via Strangiato and stuff like that. By the time of Permanent Waves and Moving Pictures, I mean, they were more radio length songs that weren't quite as
time to cash the check, right?
as conceptual as this. But on side 2 of this album, 2112, I mean, there's 5 separate songs.
Yes.
And for example, the first song on side 2, A Passage to Bangkok. Okay, that song is about traveling to different places in the world, all of where they grow good weed.
Yeah.
good pot. That's what it's about, So they weren't, they weren't too hung up on themselves.
Oh, absolutely.
But on this composition, they were definitely trying to do something literary. On the album, it says right out, inspired by or something to the effect of, inspired by the writings of Ayn Rand.
Yeah.
Because they were worried about a potential copyright issue if they didn't acknowledge that.
Credit,
apparently.
Provide the credit.
And I'm not aware that there was ever any issue about that. But in any case, Rush 2112, and the side starts out with the first section of the piece is called Overture, and it is an instrumental piece. It starts out with a synthesized sound that sort of suggests outer space, and then comes in with some hard rock guitar, and then kind of goes through some different motifs, all of which are basically what a lot of people would think of as Rush style hard rock. Mm-hmm. Very straightforward, cleanly recorded. There's separation between the instruments at various points, where especially the guitar and the drums, and it's sort of like this is what Rush in this incarnation sounds like. Most people that have listened to Rush, if they heard this, would be able to identify it. Oh yeah, this is Rush.
Mm-hmm.
Or at least people that were listening to Rush around the time that we were listening to Rush in high school.
It also starts, and there's a couple different points along this sound where it almost has a feeling like you're listening to a live record, because what as it turns out are more space or stellar type sounds, could almost be like whistles, and it has kind of a larger feel to it. You'll feel the same thing later on as we talk through this in some of the acoustic portions of the song. You feel like you're listening to it in a bigger area as a part of almost like a large performance. It's an interesting sound. It's a great sound, and it's a great way. It has a strange sound. It's not what you're used to hearing, but yes, it very quickly turns into this Rush music that is very identifiable.
And I think the effect that you're talking about is, I know that Geddy Lee, when he was playing, would use these devices, and they were pedals, and I believe they're called Taurus pedals. I may be wrong about that, but it was a way to produce synthesized sounds using a foot pedal. And I assume that there was some programming that may have had to be done. I don't know. I don't have a real understanding of how this device worked. But Geddy Lee and possibly Alex Lifeson, the guitarist as well, would use these pedals to sort of add texture, synthesize texture to the music. And therefore they were able to recreate some of the things that they did in the studio on stage with just the three instruments. They didn't have to bring on an extra keyboard player or anything like that.
Yeah.
And so so they were creating something that sounded richer than you'd imagine just three guys with drums, bass, and guitar could create. But we're able to do it live. And so
we saw them live. It wasn't on this tour. It was on the
Permanent Waves tour.
Permanent Waves tour. I mean, they did this song as a part of it, and you got three guys standing up there, but you're hearing a lot more. And this was not that they put on recorded music. They had equipment where they could play the synthesizer with their feet and have these different types of effects, so that they could produce a lot more to make a much fuller and complex sound with just three people standing up there.
Yeah, and I mean, and that was I recall that concert very well. In Green Bay, that was at Brown County Arena in Green Bay, about 45 years ago, by my math.
Yeah.
And well, they opened that concert with kind of a truncated version of 2112.
Yeah.
That's how they opened the concert. And we also saw them together, I believe it was 2004.
Yes.
That was their 30th anniversary tour.
Yes.
Actually at the MGM in Las Vegas.
Yeah.
And well, I'll tell you, I mean, you could tell by looking at them that they'd aged, but boy, their playing was spot on back then, or even after all that time had passed. So it's sort of, it's not only the intro to the introductory portion of the piece, but it's also a good kind of intro of this is the progressive that has just come into being. The very end of the first segment called Overture, the music kind of comes down, and you hear right before the second section goes into effect, the Geddy Lee, the vocalist, sings, "And the meek shall inherit the earth," and I mean, and something we're starting to do a little bit in these podcasts now, Mark. But could you put in just a clip of that
Sure.
transition from Overture into the next segment?
Yeah, let's hear it.
Okay.
And the meek shall inherit the earth.
All right. So you just heard the transition from the end of the first segment into the beginning of the second segment, which is called The Temples of Syrinx. And that starts out with just some just straight ahead hard rock and a just epic Neil Peart drum fill. The sort of thing that was something that back then he was known for. And it was a sound that was unlike other drummers. You've got, I mean, and there's a lot of great classic rock drummers. I mean, like Keith Moon of the Who, John Bonham, Led Zeppelin, and whatnot. But there was a unique, very precise, almost jazz fusiony sound sometimes to Neil Peart, despite the fact that they weren't a jazz fusiony band at all.
Well, and I mean, when you hear John Bonham or Keith Moon, either of those, there's almost, and this is the wrong term because they're incredibly good drummers, but there's almost a sloppiness to their drumming. The sounds themselves are very thick in the ways you can almost picture like larger drumsticks that they're using. And it almost seems to like compensate for some of the changing moods in the songs and what could almost like cover up imperfections in the timing of the music that they're playing with, although that's not what they were doing. They were very intentional about what they were doing, but the sound had kind of a sloppiness to the sound. Very, very good drummers, but different type of sound. Neil Peart's was precision is the way that you would describe the way that he drummed. A lot of it and very precise in its timing and its just kind of its pitch and everything. Just a different sound.
Well, and drummers like John Bonham, Keith Moon, or like Ian Pace in Deep Purple. I mean, those guys, they were in the right place at the right time as far as being on the beat and whatnot.
Oh yeah.
And John Bonham in particular, they had a way with the groove, but they just there was a precision that Neil Peart had that I mean, like for example, Bill Bruford, who played with Yes, was a very precise drummer and he could do very intricate things. And so it's not like Neil Peart was above and beyond these other drummers in that regard. In any case, what was just played a few minutes ago was a good example of how he played the drums. And the song The Temples of Syrinx introduces the society where this story takes place, and the singing is by the priests of the Temple of Syrinx, and the Temples of Syrinx is basically a massive computer complex that kind of controls everything. And, we've taken care of everything, the words you read, the songs you sing, the pictures that give pleasure to your eyes. It's a society where the powers that be dictate what goes on with the people who live in the society. Not unlike how the Soviet Union was perceived by Ayn Rand and by many others. And it's a conventional, with a progressive feel to it. And it's not. I don't know if the music and the song really require a lot more elaboration than that.
No, it's the Geddy Lee's vocals in this are memorable though. They're very powerful. It's a great example of when he's pushing it as a singer. Rush sings plenty of songs that with softer lyrics and kind of musical themes. This part though, when he's proclaiming the priest is a great example of when he's really on and kind of amped up the vocals that he does, which is pretty powerful in this particular case.
Well, that's a good point that you raise because I kind of take it for granted at this point, but Geddy Lee he's a very unique sounding voice, and I think the best word or the best way that his singing that I've heard described is banshee vocals. And I think this song is a perfect example of that.
Yeah.
I mean, and I hadn't necessarily thought about it in those terms until you mentioned it just now, but I mean, if someone was going to say, who's this guy that sings for Rush? I mean, what does he sound like? This song would be the song to say, this is him when he's kicking it into gear. Yeah.
Also, I mean, it's just physically, difficult to do. He had a unique sounding voice. This is the type of song that if you were at a place doing karaoke and they announced that, so-and-so is going to come up and karaoke, the temples of Syrinx, you'd be like, okay. and if they were able to nail it, this would be someone that was really had their stuff together. It is not something that I'll do a little karaoke from time to time. Not this, because it's a demanding vocal performance.
Yeah. So this song it sort of sets the table for this is the society where the protagonist lives, and the what I call him the protagonist because he's not the only singer. The priests are the singers in the Temples of Sea Rings, but the protagonist is just he's a man. He's referred to on the album cover in the notes as Anonymous. Mm-hmm. So it's this anonymous man who lives some dude who lives in this society, who's kind of under the authority of this red star, which is the symbol of the powers that be, who are the priests at the Temples of Sea Rings. He's out. He's either fishing or picking rice. He's doing something on the water as you move into the next song, which is called Discovery. It's the third segment of the composition, and you can hear the sound of a waterfall. And there was an of 2112 and also Moving Pictures with Blu-ray audio discs. They were separate releases, but there's a Blu-ray audio disc that's available for Rush 2112, and it has a 5.1 surround sound mix. And as I've mentioned on some other of our podcasts, for anyone who has the equipment to properly play a surround sound mix on a Blu-ray audio disc, it's like there is a waterfall in the corner of the room you're sitting.
Yeah. Yep.
The sound is just strikingly realistic. But in any case, there is a cave that he discovers behind the waterfall. And so he goes in and he's looking around and he comes upon an instrument. It's a guitar, and he doesn't know what it is. It's this thing, and it's probably been sitting there for, we don't know how long necessarily, but it's been there for a while. And he starts to touch the strings, and he describes it. He says, what can this strange device be? When I touch it, it gives forth a sound. It's got wires that vibrate and give music. What can this thing be that I've found?
What can this strange device be? When I touch it, it gives forth a sound. It's got wires that vibrate and give music. What can...
So we hear him. He picks up this guitar and he starts to touch it, and he's just sort of random notes that don't really fit together. But then he starts to realize that he can create music that has some harmony to it, and that the strings, when played properly, will give pleasant sounding music. And as the song continues, and his ability to play this thing that he's found, this guitar, it turns into actual music and actual guitar playing. And a little digression is in order here, because back in these days, back in junior high, there was radio, and there was album-oriented radio at that point. Although in junior high, it was more in high school before we started listening to WAPL, more WIXX.
Yeah.
when FM
Still song oriented.
FM
song
top
radio.
40 station. But a lot of the music that we were exposed to was music that we heard when we went over to friends' places who had these records. You know, there were, and usually, I mean, back in those days, it was usually someone who was a year or two older than us. And so we're kind of exposed to a little more of what life had to offer than we were. And I can still remember one of our neighbors, and I don't, you know, like I say, I don't like to throw out names of people that I haven't seen in a long time on these podcasts, but you'll know who this is. It was one of our neighbors, was 2 years older than us, liked a lot of music, liked to party. And kind of in that sort of, you know, dazed and confused era of the late 70s. I can remember being over at his house and he was playing this. Mm-hmm. And he's talking about like, no, man, you know, the guy finds a guitar in the cave and he doesn't know what it is. And I'm kind of sitting there like in 8th grade or whatever, like, wow, far out. You know? And he's like, okay, well, he starts playing it and he figures out. And suddenly, and then as the music is getting more coherent and starting to move a little faster. And he's saying, and yeah, and now he's running through the cave playing and he's freaking out, man. And I'm sitting there like, this is pretty wild. But that's how you were exposed to this kind of music. While, you know, and while that's kind of a scruffy way of presenting it, that's kind of what's happening in this song.
Yeah. Well, and it's also, I think it's important to note the way this is, we talked about how this story is similar to a later Rush song, Red Barchetta. And in Red Barchetta, it's a little bit different situation. You're talking about in the, you know, he's got an uncle that's got a farm that has this car. His uncle was alive before cars were outlawed. Everybody knows what cars are. You're just not allowed to drive them anymore. Now, in this society, though, music has kind of been abolished and replaced by whatever the priests want you to hear for so long that people don't even know what these musical instruments are anymore. I mean, this is, you know, generationally, this has passed. It's completely gone. So this guy doesn't even understand what he's looking at. It's interesting. It points out just how far removed this society is from any type of music at all. And as this person begins to start playing it and hearing it, yeah, he does kind of freak out. I mean, this is new. This is great. He really enjoys it.
Well, and the song kind of transitions into a newer chord progression before kind of transitioning into the next section of the piece, which is called Presentation, because the man thinks, I need to tell everybody about this.
Yeah, I got to get this out.
I need to tell the priests.
I can't wait to share this new wonder. The people will all see its light. Let them all make their own music. The priests praise my name on this night. I know it's most unusual to come before you so, but I found an ancient miracle. I thought that you should know. Listen to my music and hear what it can do.
All right. So, I mean, that what just played there was the end of the Discovery piece and the beginning of the next, which is sort of the instrumental introduction to the next piece, which is called Presentation. And the man ends up taking this guitar to the temple and presenting it to the priests, and he is, look, I found this thing. This is gonna be wonderful. And the song presentation is it's sort of a dialogue between the anonymous man and the priest, and he is, and the music changes from kind of an uplifting, bright,
look at what I have. This is great.
I found an ancient miracle, he sings. So he's come in with optimism and wonder, and is looking forward to how what he's found is going to be a good thing for the future.
Oh, I mean, he's like, we've solved cancer here. We've cured this. I mean, I have found something that is life-changing, world-changing that I'm going to bring to the world, and he's excited about it.
And everything is great until the priests respond. And so the song, in this dialogue between the anonymous man and the priest, the music changes when you move from the anonymous man to the priest. And Mark, why don't you play a little bit of that back and forth?
Yeah, we'll tee that up.
All right. So you've got this guy is so high on this, but the priest's response is, it's nothing new. It's just a waste of time. Yeah. Another toy that helped destroy the elder race of man. And the guy's like, what?
Yeah.
And he even said,
I can't believe it.
And then he goes, I can't believe what you're saying. These things just can't be true. Our world could use this beauty. Just think what we might do. And those are the sort of things, that's where the protagonist is coming from. The priests are just,
they're not buying it.
Forget it.
Yeah.
We'll take that. Forget you ever saw it. Go back home. Everything's going to be okay. You'll forget about it in the morning. I mean, and that's where things are at.
This music, it goes completely against what they have been trying to control and achieve. This removal of individuality, this removal of creativity. This guy has found a tool of creativity, and the priests want nothing to do with it, and not the answer that Anonymous was looking for when he started his presentation.
So the priests at the temple have been introduced into the song. The anonymous protagonist has been introduced into the song. And then when you bring them together, therein lies the rub. And the back and forth in presentation between when the protagonist is putting his cards on the table and when the priests are responding, it goes from some good Geddy Lee bass playing in the protagonist's section that you can hear much clearer than you can hear his bass playing in some other parts of the side. But after his encounter with the priest, our hero is bummed out. I mean, I guess there's no other way to say it. And the next section, the fifth section of the composition, is called Oracle, the Dream. And after he leaves the priest, and I wandered home through silent streets and fell into a fitful sleep. He begins to dream. And the beginning of the section is kind of quiet and sort of down. It's quiet and somber, I think is maybe the word that I'm looking for. But then the band kicks in when he starts to dream, and the lyrics describe him. He's traveling through space, and he eventually encounters the oracle and leads, or I think he actually encounters the oracle before he starts traveling through space, because an oracle confronts me there. He leads me on light years away through astral nights, galactic days. So he meets the oracle and they travel through space together. And eventually, I mean, his dream is that the elder race of man who existed in his world before the priests and the temple took over, he sort of meets them, and sort of the dream is that they come home. Mm-hmm. And they tear the temples down, and that is and that is the dream. It's musically kind of similar to the other songs, where there's some back and forth between the more quiet, somber pieces, parts of the song, and the harder rock parts of the song. But it kind of sets up it's moving the story along like this. There's got to be some way that this ends, but before moving into the next section, which and things happen pretty quickly.
Yeah.
But that's the significance I see to the dream, is that he dreams that the change that he wants to see happen is going to happen.
Or that, yes, I see that. I think that what he also sees is what he imagined when he found this guitar and really got like up on it, like seeing all the potential and the possibilities. This dream, coming into contact with this elder race, the people that were actually using it, it was like, yeah, that's what I thought could be possible was possible. I mean, I wasn't off base here. There is a place, there is a people where what I envisioned is real, is reality. So it kind of confirmed what he thought when he was back in the cave, really, with his eyes lighting up about what this thing that he found could actually do or actually be, kind of confirmation of that.
Well, and the part of the lyrics in the dream are, I see the hand of man arise with hungry mind and eyes. Mm-hmm.
Well, which is what you lose if you have no individuality, right? You don't have people achieving things. You don't have people seeing what's out there and doing things. Now, this also could be interpreted like, okay, the rising hand, that could also be, now they've got the ability to come back again. They've got the ability to rise again. But they wouldn't have that ability at all if they had none of their individualism. Because the ability to have good ideas and achieve those ideas is the first thing you lose when you lose all your individuality. So he's definitely seeing into a different world than he exists in now.
Well, and the desire to change the world is kind of one of the one of the primordial instincts of man, is something that, given the reality of the everyday world, is something that the majority of people, never really have the opportunity to. They do have the opportunity, and most people do, change their own lives and their own world within the larger world. But given the nature of the society in which the anonymous protagonist lives, that's not an option. And the only way to accomplish that is for the world itself to change. It's it's a profound, not necessarily a unique or new or unusual subject matter, but
No.
it is profound.
But it you also don't need some draconian computer run society to get a sense of that. There's plenty of people in our world where there's plenty of creativity around and opportunity to do things. But after a while, life beats a little of that out of you, the desire to make changes or to improve the world or whatever it might be. You can, I mean, we talked about it was 45 years ago that we saw Rush for the first time. And, in that time, there's been a little bit that's changed on our perspective of the world and how much of it we can actually control. Yeah. And so some of that just comes out in our world. You can even imagine in a world where forcibly all of that notion was beat out of people to remove their individual desires and traits and that type of thing. Much harder to see a world like this.
So that, in any case, that is the dream.
Yeah.
And the next, the sixth segment of 2112 is called Soliloquy, and it's basically he's woken up from the dream, and it's the song starts out with kind of a dreamy, no pun intended. Dreamy sort of sound where the sleep is still in my eyes, the dream is still in my head. I heave a sigh and sadly smile and lie a while in bed. I wish that it might come to pass, not fade like all my dreams. And then those thoughts, not fade like all my dreams. Well, that's kind of the reality that he wakes up to, and then the song transitions into just a despairing hard rock sound as the recollection of his dreams transitions to the bleak reality of his life under the red star, where he lives. And I mean, it'd be worth, Mark, I mean, why don't you play that transition from the dreamy to the bleak for
Sure.
a few seconds.
The sleep is still in my eyes, the dream is still in my head. I heave a sigh and sadly smile and lie a while in bed. I wish that it might come to pass, not fade like all my dreams. Just think of what my life might be in a world like I have seen. I don't think I can carry on this cold and empty life.
So in any case, you hear this change from sort of a kind of coming awake and slowly coming to terms with the fact that it is only a dream, and
remember, I mean, this guy's been beaten down twice now. Okay, first he has this amazing discovery that he's so excited about. This music, we can make our own music. We can share it with the world, and that gets shoved right back into his face by the priests who want to have nothing to do with it. So, he goes on the nod, takes a nap, and he sees this world where it's actually there, where it's present, and it's everything that he thought it could be. And then he wakes up from that and he's brought right back down again. So, I mean, he's been crushed twice now in a relatively short amount of time. Not feeling overly up on things.
Well, in the contrasting music, for example, in Presentation, his hopeful attitude is met with the sort of cynical response from the priests. And
Yeah.
in this song, his desire to hold on to the dream is squelched by, the realization as he actually wakes up that he's not going to
Yep.
be able to accomplish it. And it's the soliloquy is not a lengthy piece,
No.
but I mean, at the end, the concluding lyrics of the piece are, "My spirits are low in the depths of despair. My lifeblood spills over." I mean, he kills himself.
Yes.
I mean, that's, that is about as bleak as it gets. And after those lyrics are sung, that "my lifeblood spills over," there's sort of a pause, but then there's sort of a triumphant rock guitar sound that comes in, and the band kicks in, and it really is there. It is a triumphant instrumental, because the seventh and final section that starts at that point is called the grand finale, and which is primarily instrumental piece. And it's not unlike the overture, but instead of being the introduction, it's the and it's, as you're listening to it, the music gives you the feeling that something good is going to happen. Whatever it was that caused the anonymous protagonist to kill himself, if he'd hung on a little longer, he would have been here to see something happen. And
you don't. Yes, something. There's definitely some type of. It's instrumental. So, but they do a good job of bringing forth, a conflict or a battle or something that is going on, which, just based on the way that the story is flowing, could potentially be the return of the elder humans.
Yeah, and I guess that is the sounds of battle is maybe a good way to describe what's happening, but it's not a chaotic,
No.
Fear and
It's more glorious. It's more glorious.
That's a good word to use. And then the concluding sounds of the instrumental almost has kind of like explosions there, but like you say, more like fireworks than destruction, almost. But the conclusion of the composition is what one might call ambiguous. And the concluding words of the piece, Mark, why don't you give that so our listeners can hear that? All right. Well, that was the concluding portion of 2112, and the voice is telling, "Attention, all planets of the Solar Federation," and the Solar Federation is what's that's kind of like the Empire, and the anonymous protagonist is one of the rebels. If you're gonna look at a Star Wars comparison, so attention, all planets of the Solar Federation, but then we have assumed control. We have assumed control. Now, so you've got two things going on here. It appears that someone has come in and told the priests at the temple, "Lay down your weapons because your time in power is done." But at the same time, they're saying, "We have assumed control," which one could argue was the problem with the priests in the first place.
Yeah, and there's the way that it talks, it seems like, well, there's been a change of control. So the priests were in charge before. Now there's been a change, because it wasn't "we have resumed control. It's like we have assumed control. And the ominous nature of the voice doesn't make it sound like if there was some type of conflict with this, elder human race that was trying to return to provide the type of individualism and happiness from a previous time. I don't imagine that's what they'd sound like, when they were talking. So there's kind of a question about who has assumed control as I listen to this.
Well, and it's like after the Death Star was destroyed,
Yeah.
you've got the rebels and everybody and the Ewoks are all celebrating. Yeah. The tone of this is different.
Yes.
And if this was inspired by Ayn Rand, the individual versus the collective is sort of that's where the back and forth is. And you've had the back and forth between the anonymous protagonist and the priest during the song, which are represented by different types of music, different tone. And that's what's going, that's the yin and the yang. That's what's going up against each other. And I don't think that Neil Peart's thinking was, he wasn't an anarchist, but he was an individualist. But I think that if my own interpretation is that sort of all forms of collective consciousness as opposed to individual freedom, he's more of a libertarian.
Yeah.
And libertarians are necessarily suspicious of any government.
And any control.
Yeah. I think it's certainly not a utopian type message that the band is trying to send. And I don't know how I would label it.
Well, I would label it as a really cool way to, yes, there is a lot of ambiguity about what actually happens here, but a resolution occurred. And to listen to it, it's cool. And that became you'd hear it in school in the hallway. Someone off in the distance, you'd hear someone going, "We have assumed control. We have assumed control." It was a cool way to wrap this up that stuck. And it sticks with you when you listen to it and afterwards, and just a great effect to come to a conclusion of what musically is a lengthy story, but just in a cool way. The sound of the voice and the way that it came at the end of those explosions and stuff. Just cool.
Well, and I mentioned earlier the Blu-ray audio version of 2112 is worth anybody's time. If they're interested in the music at all, they would be. And with Blu-ray audio recordings, you get a picture on the TV or a monitor connected to whatever equipment you're playing it on. And that's how you operate the menu on the discs, or at least that's how I do. And for 2112, there's sort of like a graphic novel depiction of the story, including word bubbles with the lyrics and everything like that. And it's cool. And if you want to get into literary interpretation and political philosophy and Ayn Rand and picking apart what the lyrics precisely indicate and what they don't and all that sort of analysis, well, this is a sort of material where if you so choose, you can.
You could spend some time doing that.
You could, if that's what you wanted. However, going back to the 1976, kind of the dazed and confused era where you're hanging out at your neighbors and whatnot. 2112 is kind of a good sort of thing where you pull out the graphics and kick back and check it out, and it's cool.
That's right. Exactly.
It's cool.
So listen to some music.
So that is 2112 1.
Great album, great side, great conversation, Mike.
All right. We will see you, Mark, next time.